No matter what your age or your life path, whether making art is your career or your hobby or your dream, it is not too late or too egotistical or too selfish or too silly to work on your creativity. Those are the wise words of Julia Cameron from her book, The Artist's Way. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking all about creativity and what it can do to improve your life. Let's get into it.
Sometimes, the work is so, you try to be true. You feel sometimes it's on the verge of a kind of craziness, but it isn't really craziness. It's really getting the truest part of yourself out, and it's very hard, I mean, it's not easy, let's say. And yet it can be very simple at the same time.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And I'm excited to talk about this. I'll be honest, before we get into today's topic, I just want to speak to the world right now. Last week's podcast was all about looking forward into 2025 and having hope for the future and kind of persevering in spite of the circumstances that we're all facing. And I'm still here with that energy, of course, but it's been a rough week. It's been a really rough week. And this next week is going to be just more of the same. And my soul is weary. I'll be so honest with you guys. It's heavy. This week I spent some time writing out my thoughts about this. I wrote a piece called Holding Space for Collective Grief, and you can access that for free over on my Substack or Patreon. You can also listen to it. I recorded it for both of those platforms as well. Whether you're a reader or a listener, you can have it both ways. I really just needed to sit and write how I was feeling as the news for all these various things were coming through or was coming through. And so if you're someone that's been consumed by the weight of the world, then I encourage you to go check that out. I'm still hopeful. And I know that I was called to make this podcast for a reason at this time. I know that I had to do some self-work before I could come back to it, because I did start my podcast like 2 years ago and then took a break, a long break, and we're finally back. And it just happened to be during this crazy time. But I know that it's for a reason. And the reason that has been apparent to me is that we have to not allow these forces, these larger forces, to strip our humanity from us. And I truly believe so deeply that creativity is the heart of humanity. We are makers. As a species, if we think of ourselves as animals, what we do is make, right? So like a spider weaves webs. I don't know, monkeys climb trees. I don't know. There's like certain things that you think of whenever you think of certain animals, right? And when it comes to us, I would say we are makers. We are inventors. That's what we do. That's how we have existed as a species, and it's how we have evolved as a species over years and years. And not all of that evolution is good, but some of the things that we've invented are not so great. But the fact remains that at our core, humans are very creative. And I think that our power lies in that. And when we focus on creativity requires a certain amount of open-mindedness, right? Because in order to create something that didn't exist before, you have to think it up and you have to make it happen and use the skills to create whatever it is that you're envisioning. And of course, we can still be creative and just like color in a coloring book. But even like the application of colors on a page it's a practice that opens our mind and creates neural pathways. And I think that it's really the key to what we need in order to heal humanity. That sounds so strange to say, but we're in this time of rigidity. We're in this time where people are very, very rigid in their beliefs and in their worldview. And I think it's important for all of us to be more open and to understand that even if we've believed in certain things, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. Or another perspective might align with you even more than you know. And if you can allow yourself to create those kind of creative, open neural pathways in order to change your mind and learn and grow, I think that we can change the heavy divide that has developed. And I'm speaking specifically to my country, which is the United States. But I think that this exists across the globe. You know, I'm not the most well-rounded when it comes to international news. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on anything. But from what I've seen, a lot of places are dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with here. And so my little talk on creativity today is aimed at the goal of empowering you to harness this power of creativity as a human. It is your human right to be able to do some creative shit. It will help you to feel lighter too. I know for myself personally that creativity, and I have many outlets for creativity, I know that it's helped me in so many different ways. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. I actually don't think I'm going to answer any questions in today's podcast, which I didn't think I was going to do on this season. But I think I'm just going to yap. So I've got a lot to say. So we'll get into it. But that's what I wanted to start off with today, to tell you kind of my intentions around talking about creativity and incorporating it into my little corner here on the internet where you so kindly joined me. One of the big reasons I wanted to talk about creativity was to tackle this concept of creative blocks or artist block. And we've all heard of it before. We typically think about it when we think of like professional artists, right? But I would argue that all of us have creative blocks that we have to work through. Even if you don't consider yourself a professional artist, just like the quote that I started today with, you know, if art is just a hobby or a dream of yours, don't allow creative blocks to stop you from trying. That's why I really love the book, The Artist's Way. And I'll be so honest with you guys. I have this book and I've started it years ago and I never finished it. Maybe this episode will be the inspiration that I need to work through this book, because honestly, it would do me a lot of good. But what she talks about a lot in this book is how creativity and creative blocks are a lot of the time solved through just practicing, just taking the pressure off of the product and allowing yourself to just practice. Because guess what? Certainly there are people that are born with innate talents that are able to just produce like the most amazing art without having to try very much, right? Okay, that exists. Let's put that aside. Most people that you know that are artists or creatives of some sort, this could even speak to creatives on the internet, like people that are making YouTube videos and stuff. Do you think that they could always make such beautiful YouTube videos like they're making? No, they had to learn that shit. They had to practice it. Every artist that you know, every creative that you know has had to practice and learn and fail and get better. So, and I say that knowing that personally as a musician, it took me many, many hours of practicing. And I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. And I get better all the time too, whenever I take the time to actually practice and mindfully practice too. So I wanted to talk about this today to bring that to you. If you have any kind of creative hobby that you used to engage in, that you used to really enjoy, and that you haven't done it for a while, I want to challenge you to start that hobby up again. Because most of the time, the blockage that we have around this is, oh, I'm not going to be as good as I once was. Or it's not going to be as easy as it once was. And I get that. I get that. Something that I can relate to when it comes to that is the last few years that I've gone through with my wrist. So I had a cyst on top of my wrist that made it very, very painful to play. And I really couldn't use my left hand for around 2 years. And so I was partially disabled for that time. And I lost a lot of muscle in my hand and in my forearm. And a lot of flexibility too. By the time I got the surgery and the scar tissue healed, it was still intertwined with the nerves that are on my wrist. So it took a very long time, a lot of patience for my physical body to heal. And mentally, it was very hard for me to bring myself to play the piano again. Because for a long time, I had kind of accepted that I would never be able to play the piano like I had been able to play it. And I grieved that. I really grieved that and accepted that in those 2 years that I struggled with all that pain. And so I had to almost like bring my piano skills back from the dead. I had literally like buried them in my mind. In my mind, I had buried my piano, all my skills that I had worked for over the years. I had buried them and like laid them to rest. And then once I started healing, about a year after the surgery, I started trying to play piano again. And I cried a lot because it hurt and it was not easy and I could not play the stuff I had been able to play before. And I knew that that was what was going to be the case, right? I'm not an idiot. I knew what I was getting into, but it was incredibly difficult to start. And I had to be very, very, very patient and very slow to build these skills again and to build up the physical strength within my fingers in a slow way that prevented me from experiencing another injury. And playing on TikTok for all of you guys was a big part of that. And so some of you had probably heard me time and again say like, oh, my wrist is a little sore, so I'm probably going to cut this live stream short. And so I share all of this to say that like, I know what it feels like to not engage in a creative outlet of yours and to lose the ease that came with that routine use of it, right? Whenever you don't ride a bike for 20 years, it's going to be a little wobbly whenever you get back on there, right? And so I understand how that can be very hard. And that honestly, the hardest part about all that is the judgment, is the inner judgment that comes through. You want yourself to be able to go faster and to get better more quickly. But a lot of the time when we rush ourselves to perfection, we're never really going to be happy because perfection doesn't exist. And the sooner we can recognize that and celebrate that, the sooner we can get to the core of what it is to create We don't create to be perfect. We create to connect with our inner selves. Truly, I believe this. I do believe that the music that I'm able to make comes from somewhere within me. And it's not that I'm saying I don't write music, right? But the way I'm able to connect to the music that I perform feels spiritual in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying you have to be all hippy dippy like me, but I think that if you can just connect to what makes your heart sing and allow that to come out, it does so much good. It does so much good for you. And that can look like so many different things. So you don't have to be an artist, like you don't have to be a visual artist or a musician. You can be creative simply by doing the things that, creating the things that give you joy. That could be creating an organizational tool to use at work or something, getting creative about organizing. It could be just baking food that you haven't made in a really long time. It could be DIYing some stuff around your house. I don't know. Like I'm thinking of all things that I like to do, but there are plenty of things that I know there are plenty of things that you enjoy doing that you probably haven't done in a while because it feels a little frivolous. Maybe I think in our cultures, we downplay creativity. I mean, we look down upon creative people. We definitely look down upon people that make a living through creativity. And we call it easy and we think it's like an easy way out. But it's not. It's like our divine human birthright. I don't know. I feel that so deeply. And I think that it's important for us to take advantage of that. The more that we can have these moments of uncensored creativity, I think the better we become for it. And that reminds me, saying censored reminded me of this. In the book, The Artist's Way, they talk about the censor. And the censor is this concept that there's always this inner voice inside of us that tends to stop us from our creative ideas, right? And one of the ways to combat this censor voice that you may have within you is to engage in a practice called the morning pages. And I'll get into that in 1 second. I want to speak to all the people that have that censor inside of their brain that likes to tell them like, oh, no, that's a stupid idea. Like, you'll never be good at that. Don't do that. That's really irresponsible, blah, blah, blah. Shut up. Shut up, inner censor. Nobody asked you. Nobody asked you. You're just scared. You're just scared. It's okay to be scared. But you can't go around here trying to scare everybody else just because you're scared. It's going to be okay. Our inner censor kind of exists to keep us small, right? Because it's safer to be small. But I am here to tell you to take space and don't be afraid. It's okay. Everything that you create is not going to be the most wonderful, gift to humanity. All right. And that's okay. There are some nights that I get on live and I make mistakes all over the place. And, I don't beat myself up for that. I never have. That's the thing I love about piano is that I don't have much of an inner censor when it comes to that. I do have inner censors when it comes to art, when it comes to writing, when it comes to modeling and photography. I definitely have inner censors when it comes to those things, but piano is one of those things that I don't have the inner censor for. And I think my long journey of building the practice of piano back up in my life is to thank for that lack of censor. Because I really had to let go of that. I really had to allow myself to just be where I was at and not beat myself up for it. And of course, in the beginning, I did really beat myself up about it, even though it was like out of my control. Of course, I can't play what I used to be able to play. But over time, I was able to build more self-love and understanding and kindness so that whenever that voice would come up, I would quiet it and I would remind myself, like, this is just a process. We have to trust the process and we have to have patience because it's not worth pushing too hard and hurting yourself. So when we talk about inner censors, that's the kind of remedy that I want to give to you. If you have an inner censor voice that has been telling you not to pursue a certain creative project that you've wanted to do, work past it. Try to work past it. It's so worth it. It's so worth it in the long run. So this very first practice within the artist's way, and I really encourage you to buy this book for yourself. It's a really, I know I outed myself as not getting through the book, but it's so, even just the first few chapters are incredible. And she speaks in a spiritual language, but she also speaks to the atheists and the agnostics out there that don't like the term God. And I get that. I don't really like the term God for my own spiritual practice either, though I've been slowly healing that over the years. Some people don't like that. And she talks to that. She speaks to how this can be like an inner growth experience without it having to connect to spirituality. But it's such a great book worth buying. So if this kind of thing interests you, then I would really recommend checking out this book. If you want to hear me talk more about creativity in the lens of spirituality, I had a guest episode on my astrology teacher Danny's podcast, That Witch Next Door, in which we talked all about art magic. It is such a good episode. I can't recommend it enough. If you want to listen to it, it's linked in my link tree. If you just scroll down the page, Art Magic on That Witch podcast. But the big concept of the morning pages is where the practice comes in. So in this book, they encourage you to every day wake up and write 3 pages in a journal. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It can just be train of thought. It could be something that's been on your mind, or, whatever. It could be a creative story that you wanted to write. And this is for everybody. This is not just for people that want to be writers. This is this creative practice of just getting words, thoughts, concepts, ideas out of your brain and into the world. It's about using that power of conception, okay? She refers to it as a brain drain free writing exercise and dumping the stress out of your mind. It can just be this practice of taking what is in your head and without judging it, without allowing the censor to stop you, getting it out. And doing this over time helps us to learn how to work past that censor voice, because a lot of us really struggle to ever get past it. We don't allow ourselves to try because that censor voice is so strong within us. So the morning pages stresses the importance of just getting something out onto these pages, putting on a 10-minute timer, getting it out, and not judging it, allowing it to be what it is. You don't even have to read it again if you don't want to, but having a little notebook, this could be a digital notebook if you wanted to use that you do these 3 pages of morning pages every day. It could be evening pages if you want that, or afternoon pages, whatever works for you. That is just a powerful way to train your brain to allow you to have ideas and execute them. And this could be all kinds of things, right? It doesn't, you could even turn this, if you are an artist, you could turn this into an art activity as well, right? There's a lot of ways that you can kind of branch off of this practice if you're a cook or a baker, like you could just like experiment with something once a day. I don't know. Like there's so many ways that you can use this type of brain draining, just dumping ideas to really foster your inner creativity and allow it to shine instead of allowing the critic to control it. I think it's interesting that in this book they use the term censor, the inner censor, because we we live in a world that is becoming so increasingly censored. And I find it interesting that that has been mirrored within ourselves. I think that we have this fear of judgment that lives within us because of our society. And I'm here to tell you that it's not worth stopping yourself from ever trying something creative just because of the fear of judgment. Take it from an online sex worker. I face judgment quite often. It has become a regular part of my life. So don't allow it to stop you. People may not understand the art that you make, but that just means that it wasn't for them. There are people that will resonate with what you create, no matter the medium or the outlet. You just have to trust that you will find those people. And that's been a big process for me as well over these last few years of being a quote unquote creator on the internet. It's hard whenever you are subject to public judgment, right? I've certainly gone through that, but if there's anything that I've learned, it's that people are allowed to have their opinions, and their opinions don't have to sway my own self-acceptance or self-love or self-judgment, I guess. And I hope that that can empower you to go for it. Surround yourself with people that support your art. It's important to find pockets of support in that way because a lot of people are dealing with that inner censor, that inner critic voice. And they, even when they're met with the people they love telling them about the creative pursuits that they are starting, sometimes people are triggered by that. Sometimes people are afraid whenever you say things like that. It triggers them and it brings something up within themselves that they can't deal with. And so it comes out as a lack of support. It comes out as, oh, you're really going to do that? Or like, do you have the time? Do you have the resources? Do you have the energy to do that? The naysayers, right? Don't allow the naysayers to stop you just because they couldn't do it themselves. All right. And you will come across plenty of naysayers, but I can't remember the exact quote and I can't remember where it came from, but there's this idea of like, don't take advice from people that haven't been where you've been and haven't been where you want to go. Okay. So look for inspiration from people that are doing what you would like to do. And that's speaking more specifically to people that like want to do something creative for a living. But to the rest of everyone, like creativity can be such an enriching part of your life, especially if it's not tied to money. And I say that as a person that's creativity is so tied to how I make a living. And that is both a blessing and a curse sometimes because it can put a lot of pressure on what I create, right? And there's issues that come with that, certainly. If you guys have any questions about balancing that as a creative yourself, maybe you have struggled with these kinds of things, I would love to hear your questions on that in a future episode. I'd love to answer some of your concerns about burnout as a creative person. But it can be so enriching just as a hobby, just as a regular part of your routines. I'm going to end with a little example in my life. When I came out of college, I took a job teaching in public school, which is something I didn't actually really want to do, but it was kind of like the practical thing and where a lot of the people that I looked up to in my life kind of pushed me towards. And so I took a job I didn't really want to do, and I did all right at it. I did an okay job at it, but it wasn't for me. And by the end of the time that I spent there, I was really going through it. I was very depressed, very anxious. I'd lost so much weight. I was so skinny. And something had to give at that time. I had a therapist that I was seeing who recommended a specific yoga teacher to me because she obviously could tell the amount of stress that I was under. And she recommended yoga, and specifically this one yoga teacher that did kind of meditative practices with her classes. And I went to this yoga teacher, and to this day, oh my God, she was such a blessing in my life. At the time, I did not know that she was a witch, but she's definitely a witch. When I look back on all the things that we did, she was totally a witch. And that was before I was a witch. So it's interesting to reflect on that. But I remember talking to her after a couple different yoga classes. I would stay after for a bit just to chat because she was also a musician and her husband was a musician as well. And if you don't know, my partner is also a musician. We met in music school. So her husband would come and play live guitar at her classes, and he would make these beautiful loops. Like, it was amazing. It was fantastic. And so I would stay after and chat with them sometimes. I really looked up to her. She's probably, I think they're Gen Xers, probably. I'm a millennial, in case you're wondering. In these times that I talked with her, we talked so much about the way that simple creative practices can really, really help you emotionally. And she was like, do you like to bake? I was like, yeah, I love baking. She was like, when's the last time you baked? And I was like, oh, I don't know, like probably a year ago. Like, I just haven't had the time, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, make some muffins or something, like create something. Okay. Go get some coloring books. I know you're busy. I know you don't have a lot of time in your life right now, but incorporate these simple little things in order to start relieving some of the stress that you have. And I did incorporate those things into my life, and it was huge. And it ultimately, I believe, that was the beginning of when I decided, okay, I'm done with this. Like, I'm not happy here. I have to make some changes. And it was whenever I started doing those things and practicing yoga and really getting into the creative outlets that I had let go of, that I made the decision to get another job, which ultimately set me on the track to where I am today. And so the power of creativity is very palpable, and it can start from very small things like coloring a coloring book. It really can. And so I hope that listening to this episode was inspiring for you. Don't underestimate the power of making things. Like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it is our human gift. I truly believe that as humans, we are makers, we are creators. And especially in times that are so stressful, it's important for us to grab on to doable practices, right? So if you're looking to start an instrument or get better at drawing or become a writer, do a little bit of that every day. Just a little bit. I want you to be on your own side when you're doing this, right? Don't judge yourself through the process. Just allow it to flow through you. And eventually it becomes like second nature. That's truly what I feel like with piano now. It is second nature. I can actually pretty much turn off my brain when I'm playing the piano. Although sometimes while I'm live streaming and looking at comments while I'm playing, it's a little harder to turn off my brain. But when I'm able to really focus on just playing, it is it is so cathartic and it's such a huge stress reliever. And that's so important for us right now to do for ourselves. So I hope that you enjoyed listening. I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions related to this kind of thing, please go ahead and send them in. You can send them on my Instagram stories, or there's a little link in my link tree for you to submit a question anytime. If it comes to you in the middle of the night, you can submit a question and I might just answer it on the podcast. So thank you so much for listening, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. You can visit marymusexoxo.com to see all of Mary's links. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on all your favorite listening platforms. And if you feel inclined, leave a 5-star review for us. Musings with Mary is listener sponsored, so if you'd like to support the podcast, please check out our Patreon. Shout out to all our current patrons. Thank you so much for the support. We'll see you in the next episode.